From the Fidelity Bank Foundation studio, PBS Kansas presents One-on-One with Victor Hogstrom.
On this program, we'll talk about life, legacy, and lessons learned along the way. My guest this week has been called the world's most accomplished air-to-air photographer. He lives right here in central Kansas. His name, Paul Bowen. Bowen's high-altitude photos have been featured on more than 1,000 magazine covers and advertising campaigns. He has also published 4 acclaimed coffee table books of his pictures. Bowen moved to Wichita in the 1970s from Los Angeles. There are some interesting stories associated with his family as well. We'll talk about all of this as I go one-on-one with Paul Bowen right now. Hello, I'm Victor Hogstrom. I'm delighted to welcome air-to-air photographer Paul Bowen to the program. Paul, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you because I hear that you are a wonderful speaker. I hear that you have been inducted in the 2 Halls of Fame, and I hear wonderful things about you, so we'll be talking about all of those things and then some.
Well, you must have been talking to my mother.
All right, so we have one of your photographs sitting right behind us. Tell us about this one and the others similar to this from your air-to-air work.
Thank you. This is a very special photograph because it's of a P-51 Mustang, which was the primary fighter used in World War II by the United States and by Britain also. And it's often credited with being the fighter that won World War II. This head-on shot was taken from the rear gunner position of a B-25 Mitchell bomber, which is kind of my office in the sky.
Okay.
And we'll talk certainly more about that later. But one of the interesting things about this picture is that this airplane, this specific airplane, honors the gentleman who is the #1 ace. Every 5 airplanes that you shoot, you become an ace. He's a triple ace. He's the highest ranked living fighter pilot from World War II, and this airplane honors him. He's 101 years old. His name's Bud Anderson.
So you got started taking photos like this in about 1972.
Yes.
Take us back to your youth and how you got interested, first of all, in this kind of work, because it is fun, but also dangerous.
It is that. It is both. Looking back on my early childhood growing up in Southern California, I spent a lot of time at the beach and started surfing when I was very young. And one day while I was out surfing, one of the other buddies of mine had bought a camera with a very long lens and started taking pictures of us surfing. And I said, let me try that. And so as I took some pictures of him and then pictures of my girlfriend on the beach and was shocked that they turned out, that's how I started into photography. Fast forward, when I moved to Wichita in the early 70s and was an avid amateur photographer, I ended up at a point getting a job assisting for $1.75 an hour the commercial photographer in town who was the best photographer, and I learned what a commercial photographer was. It's not someone who takes weddings or portraits or passports or poodles. It's someone who does products, and of course, if you're in Wichita shooting products, an airplane is at some point going to come in front of your lens. And that's when I started shooting aviation photography, and my primary business is actually with the manufacturers.
But when you first started, Paul, you didn't start shooting air-to-air.
Good point.
How did it get to that point?
Sure, good question. So In working for this other gentleman, I spent 5 months with him, and although I never went in the air with him, I learned a lot just through osmosis as he told me about how he was shooting his air-to-air photography. When I left his employment, I approached Beechcraft. He was, my friend was the photographer for Cessna at the time. Mm-hmm. So I went after Beechcraft as a client, shot some things on the ground. And then after shooting on the ground with them, they put me up in the air. I did an air-to-air shoot, and I promptly got airsick.
Oh, okay.
It was the first and last time. It's very disorienting looking through the lens as you're doing maneuvers in the air. And air-to-air photography is basically one airplane flying next to another with me taking pictures of the target airplane.
But you continued despite your air sickness.
I did, actually, and later on the client told me that after I'd taken care of my business, I said, okay, let's do some more of those maneuvers, and he told me later that one of the reasons they continued to use me was that I didn't give up, and that thankfully I happen to have an eye and for air-to-air photography, and here we are today.
So you left Cessna, and how did you get into the military? Very, as I said earlier, exciting but dangerous.
Yes. So actually, you know, any time you put more than one airplane close together in the air, it's potentially dangerous. But we have a long briefing that happens prior to going up in the air. The briefing consists of discussing what we hope to achieve artistically and then how we can achieve it safely. We're in communication between the airplanes, and we try to minimize risk. You know, one of the sayings in aviation is that the most dangerous part of a flight is the drive to the airport. And so, you know, we minimize any kind of risk by trying to brief it properly and to fly with pilots who have formation flying experience. You know, most pilots spend their careers trying to stay away from other airplanes in the air, whereas we're asking them to do just the opposite. And I might expect that I could be a decent driver, but I could not be either successful or safe in a NASCAR car because I didn't have the training.
Right.
And most pilots don't have training in formation flying or close flying together. So we require that they're there, and that minimizes the risk.
So for someone listening to you right now and wants to be like you when he or she grows up, what would be the artistic things that they should look for in air-to-air photography?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure if I've ever grown up. I think my wife might.
You still like it, though.
Might debate that, yes. And I'm just like a child when it comes to doing air-to-air photography. It's so exhilarating, and it's always different, different backgrounds, different lighting. You know, we go up in the morning at sunrise, and often are shooting past sunset. So we put in long days utilizing the best light in the morning and the evening. And I think anyone who's considering air-to-air or aviation photography, first of all, needs to fully understand their camera or their tool. And then secondly, do research as to how to achieve that safely, because it really is a potentially dangerous situation.
So before we continue to talk more, let's talk about your life, and let's talk a little bit about your family and your grandfather, who also fought in the Civil War. How does that math add up?
Right. So my grandfather, George Washington Bowen, was born in 1845. And when he was 16, he ran away to fight in the Civil War. He did, was captured, and we don't know too much more about his life until we know that when he was 60, he married an 18-year-old. And from that marriage in 1910, my father was born. And then I was born later in his life, and here I am.
Okay. And your mother worked with Marilyn Monroe.
That's true. You know, interestingly enough, growing up in Studio City, California, my first job was as an extra in a movie. I'm not sure, I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And my mother worked kind of coaching lines with Marilyn Monroe. And so she was around when Marilyn, just before Marilyn married Joe DiMaggio, and then during the time that they were married and living in Beverly Hills, she would go down in the afternoons and evenings and go over the scripts with Marilyn and hang out with Joe, and had just an amazing experience. You know, at that time, Marilyn was at the top of her game, and I remember one movie, There's No Business Like Show Business, was one that my mom specifically worked with her on.
So tell us about that road that led you to Wichita.
Sure. So I'd been involved with a church in the Hollywood area. I lived in Hollywood, and that church had an outreach to the street people, as we called them then, with meals, crash pads, counseling, and I became involved at that time. When I earned my degree in zoology from the University of California at Santa Barbara, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And a church here in Wichita contacted the church in Hollywood and said, is there anyone who can come and start a halfway house crash pad that we'd like to sponsor? And it wasn't that I was the most qualified, but I was available. And in a sense, as a product of the 60s, I thought it was time to put my life where my mouth was. And so I came here to direct a crash pad halfway house in the early 70s. Fell in love with Wichita and the people. Got a job, as I mentioned, assisting that other photographer. Stayed for a year in the halfway house directing it, which is an amazing experience, and decided that Wichita would be my home.
As a result of that, you worked, as you have already mentioned, with Cessna and military air-to-air photography, and you have become a global celebrity in aviation.
Again, you must have been talking with my mom. But, well, thankfully there aren't too many who do what I do, and I work with great pilots. You know, the pilots are the heroes of the photo shoots. I may be directing the aerial ballet and capturing what I like to call flying sculptures. But as I'm directing them in the air, if they don't move to where I need to have them, then I'll never get the shot. And so thankfully I've worked with great pilots, great marketing people, Tom Zwemke, Phil Michel, Al Higdon, those folks over the years, and even more recently with Adam Mott and Lori Melton and Jamie Hayden over at Textron. And those folks have their input, and they're a big part of the team. It's a team effort, but most of the time I end up getting the credit. And that credit has included over 1,000 magazine covers over the years, and 2 Halls of Fame inductions, which certainly was humbling to me. And so I've, thankfully, again, there aren't too many who do what I do.
How many photographers of your type are there?
I'd hope to say just one, but there are, because my primary business is actually with the manufacturers, again, the Beechler Cessna folks, there are only a couple others who do any work with them. So there are certainly some great aviation photographers who do air-to-air work, and certainly under 10, who do a fair amount, and probably about 5 of us who do the majority of the work.
So I hear that you are also a wonderful speaker. You spoke, say, back in 2001 in Century 2 to Cessna operators.
Yes.
About your work.
Yes.
What is the thrust of your message when you speak to these groups? What's the basis and the whole point of your message?
Sure. Well, you know, the fact is that most of us as kids, whether we be men or women, loved airplanes. You know, many of us had model airplanes, saw pictures of airplanes, loved airplanes. There's something very romantic about aviation. And
only if I have a plane.
good point.
And own one.
And so when I spoke, for example, at the Cessna Citation Operators Conference, I basically was sharing the beauty of aviation in a form that those who might not normally be involved in aviation could appreciate not only the beauty, but the functionality, again, of business aircraft. You know, my goal is for someone to look at one of my pictures and go, wow, I wish I was there right now. And oh, look, it's a Cessna Citation, you know, rather than the other way around. I am documenting history and have for some time, but I'm also hoping to evoke an emotion that will stir people's hearts. And so when I speak at these events, I give a background as to how the team creates what they're enjoying.
Right. Okay, we do have some video of that, so we'll take a look at it very briefly.
Great.
Paul loves the B-25.
Being in the tail cone of the B-25 is the e-coupon ride at Disney World. It's the best place to be in the tail cone. We're wide open, there's no glass. It's very windy, it's extremely cold, and it's very challenging being back there because you're moving around a lot and the vibrations are great and just the swaying of the airplane is extreme. But it's beautiful back there, the view can't be beat.
I want to come back to you directing the other plane. I assume you're wearing a headset and the other pilot can hear you talk. Have you had a close call?
Yeah, so the first part of what you just asked was yes, we have a headset because it's very noisy. We actually remove doors off of airplanes, or in the case of the B-25 that we used to take this picture, I'm in the tail gunner's position and we've removed that. So I'm
for those of us who don't know what the tail gunner position is, what is that?
Well, it's
the back of the plane?
It's the very back of the airplane.
Okay, I thought so.
And so on a B-25, they had different positions with gunners.
Okay. So
I sit in the back. We remove the back. I'm in the open. Don't have to shoot through any glass and all. And so, I'm directing using a headset because it is so noisy. The second part of your question about having any close calls, you know, I've been in airplanes where we've lost an engine, where we pretty much ran out of fuel, where we nearly had mid-air collisions where one airplane, but I've only crashed once.
One too many.
One too many. Yeah, it was during takeoff, and I was in the B-25, and thankfully it ended up okay.
Right. Yes, thankfully.
Yes.
You've written several books.
Yes.
And this is one of them, Air-to-Air Warbirds.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Air-to-Air Warbirds is my third of a fourth book in the Air-to-Air series, the first two being general aviation airplanes, again, like Beechler Cessna. The Warbirds would be the generic name for the airplanes that fought, especially during World War II. And on the cover is a picture of a P-38. You know, my primary business is with the manufacturers, and that's who pays the bills. But my real passion is with the Warbirds, the World War II Warbirds, who have secured our freedoms and allow us to be here, meeting here today. So in honor of World War II and the people involved, I came out with a couple of their books.
So you have a lot of pictures in this one too?
I do.
Yes.
I do. In fact, I'm sure this picture is in fact in it.
Plenty of pictures. Okay. Paul, I know you try to play your scales down and your popularity, your importance, but you've been inducted in 2 Halls of Fame, the Kansas Hall of Fame and the International Air and Space Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And in the second one, there were some other very important people.
Yes, that was quite an honor, as you can imagine. You know, I'm just a kid with a camera, and I happen to be one of those lucky guys like yourself who actually has found a way to make a living doing what we love and to hopefully contribute some to our community and to the world. And so when I was inducted into the International Air and Space Hall of Fame, which is based in San Diego, there was a crew of 9 of us who were inducted that same evening, which included Sully from the Miracle on the Hudson,
right,
and Bud Anderson, again, in reference to this airplane, who was a World War II fighter pilot, a number of other World War II folks, some astronauts, and some people that I was certainly honored. I think I was their token person to be to be admitted. When I stood up and gave my speech, I said, "I'm proof that anyone can get inducted into a Hall of Fame."
So, of the thousands of photography or photographs, I should say, that that you've taken, do you have a favorite among all of them?
You know, I actually have 2.
2.
I do, and I get asked that question every once in a while, and the 2 are of my 2 grandchildren, my 2 grandsons. We have a granddaughter also, but Bodie and Charlie are sitting in a little pedal plane that is a replica of this airplane, this World War II, and they're great pictures, and I expect one day they'll fly the real thing.
Is it among your favorite because they are your grandkids?
Yes.
I thought so.
But I have a series of photographs that we call a vortices effect, and what happens is that the air off of the wings comes out from the fuselage to the wingtips and then swirls. This happens all the time. It's called a vortices, and it's only revealed when there's smoke or clouds or the marine fog layer off of the coast out on the West Coast, and that's kind of become my signature shot, and they're really fun to shoot.
So, what has been your most memorable experience taking photos?
That's like asking which of my 4 children I love the most. You know, I have had so many. You know, it's very interesting because the answer to that is probably like asking someone, what has been your most favorite vacation? And you take into account, you know, the backgrounds, the food, the wine, whatever it might be, but more often than not, it's the people you meet that are the greatest memories of a vacation, and the same is true with my photo shoots. You know, so many retired pilots have come to me later and said, the highlight of my aviation career was doing the photo shoots.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you think has made you so successful, Paul?
Well, I treat every photo shoot as if it's the most important one I've ever done. And I give it everything that I've got. And I try to surpass the quality of whatever I did the last time. I think there's another aspect in that as a Christian, I attempt to follow the golden rule. And although I fall short often, I try my best to treat people the way they would want to be treated. And so I think that there are other photographers who could be hired to do some of the jobs I've done, but because I think I attempt to work with them as a team member, and I think that's added to my success.
Other than photography, what do you do in your spare time?
So if you were to ask me where would I rather be right now than here, I would be on a surfboard in Hawaii, and that's my passion. When
You mean if they were to ask you to come back to do some more shoots, you would say no?
Oh no.
Oh.
No. I did an 8-day shoot a month and a half ago, and no, I'm still actively shooting.
Okay.
And creating the best stuff I ever have. So I'm very, very excited about that. But I'm a product of the West Coast and the ocean, and that's my biggest probably passion.
So where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Well, if the phone keeps ringing, I would hope that I'm still doing what I'm doing. I have an amazing wife and 4 children that I'm very proud of, and 3 grandchildren, and I try and spend as much time with them as possible. Business-wise, I expect that at some point it'll slow down, and I think technology will reach a point where, quite frankly, my services will be more limited in 10 years.
Has technology been affecting your work in any form or fashion?
In a good way at this point, actually. I've kept up with it, and certainly have purchased all the latest equipment, and have kept up with the latest technology. And I do get asked sometimes, do I miss film? Because we started shooting digital in 2001, actually on an assignment with Sonia Greteman in South Africa. And that was the first time I actually used a digital camera on an assignment. And slowly we phased into it as the cameras got better. But no, I expect that.
So you're loaded with a lot of equipment.
A lot of equipment. Yes.
That reminds me of one Tom Zwinke.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah, certainly Tom and I have shared airplanes together where I'd be shooting stills and he'd be shooting video, and a great guy to work with.
Paul Bowen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for taking the time to watch. oneonone@kpts.org is our email address. That's if you have a question or comment. Until next time, I'm Victor Hogstrom. Be well, and I'll see you again soon.